Western culture places a high value on originality, but originality is only possible on the basis of tradition. Art, as we know it, would not be possible without the example of older artists. But in Western culture, repeating something that has already been done is thought to be boring and pointless. The ancient Egyptians wouldn't have thought that way. Nevertheless, this leaves artists with a problem, which they confront and work through in different ways. The problem is how to acknowledge the history and traditions of the area within which they work without getting swallowed up by them. Harold Bloom looked at this issue in relation to poetry in his book The Anxiety of Influence, and came up with 6 formal means that an artist might use to engage with older artworks. He called the most important of these clinamen, which is a kind of creative misreading. And misreading, of course, is not misunderstanding. Bloom describes a way of reading the older work so as to make it swerve out of the course that the older poet had intended. For example, William Blake wrote that, and I quote, "Milton was a true poet and of the devil's party without knowing it." Blake misread the orthodox Christian content of Paradise Lost and thereby transformed its significance. And he's right. Satan is far and away the most interesting character, even if that isn't what Milton intended. Misreading, then, is a kind of betrayal of the older work, forcing it into directions that were not part of the original's intentions. It informs one of Manet's most enigmatic paintings, Luncheon in the Studio. The painting shows 3 figures in an interior, flanked by 2 still lifes. The figures seem oddly absent, while the inanimate objects that surround them are full of life. The servant, for instance, is upstaged by the brilliance of the silver coffee pot that she holds, and the ceramic plant pot behind her. Both of these objects seem to capture the sunlight in a way that eludes her, almost as if she were a ghost. The still life on the table at the bottom right is a version of a Dutch breakfast piece. The partially peeled lemon, with the rind spiralling over the front of the table, and the knife balanced on the edge with its handle to the viewer are staples of that tradition. But Manet misreads them and changes their significance. In a Dutch painting, the knife handle would project out of the depicted space and into the viewer's own space, adding an element of realism and also functioning as an invitation to viewers to project themselves imaginatively into the scene. However, Manet has placed the youth in front of the table, which means that the knife stays entirely within the depicted space. The illusionism and the notional hospitality are both blunted by this gesture. This is a small misreading, but it links to a much larger one. Dutch breakfast pieces rarely feature any figures, but the selection of objects, a broken bread roll, a half-drunk glass of wine, a cracked hazelnut, suggest a meal that has just ended or has been momentarily interrupted. Alongside the delicious food, the paintings hint at the conviviality of a shared meal. By contrast, Manet's painting, although peopled, is hardly convivial. The 3 figures don't seem to share anything. They look either bored or distracted. The objects on the table suggest a meal, but not that coherently. The man smoking a cigar has an empty coffee cup in front of him, shortly to be filled by the servant, and the implication is that he has finished eating and the young man has got up from the table and is about to leave. However, the oysters, or at least the 2 that are visible, are still in their shells, and there are no crumbs on the tablecloth or crumpled napkins to indicate that anything has been touched. The painting fleshes out the conceit of the meal as we find it in Dutch still life, only to annul it. Manet causes the tradition of still life painting to swerve. Rather than inviting viewers to project themselves into the fictional meal, he deliberately shuts them out, pushing the knife away from the viewer. And rather than using the absent diners to give life to the inanimate objects on the table, Manet uses the tactility of the meal things to point out the isolation of the figures from one another. The people, in effect, become mere objects in a larger still life. The most active creature in the painting is undoubtedly the cat, energetically washing itself beside the armour. In a traditional still life, the cat appears as an unwelcome guest, dirty and wild, walking over the oysters, sniffing the fish. Here, the cat, in another misreading, mocks civilised norms through its almost obscene cleanliness. Throughout the painting, Manet asserts his originality by misreading and redirecting the traditions he inherited. If you found this video interesting, please like and subscribe, and visit my channel, Think of a Picture, where you'll find lots more short, thought-provoking videos on art. Thank you.